It's really making yes.
Yes. Yeah.
Chris, could you adjust the temperature? Fan on photo or continuous?
It'll be on all there.
People don't continuous temporarily.
Does this do that?
Thank you.
I had it set on 89. Is that?
Trying to say that.
Still here, sir?
Yes.
I'd like to pull to order the advertised and stated monthly meeting of the Lower Moreland Township Board of Commissioners, August 9th, 2022. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Public participation on agenda items will be taken after each item is discussed, as well as at the very end of the meeting. The chair now recognizes Commissioner KURITZ, Chair of the Community Development Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. The first item on my agenda is a conditional use hearing for the Lower Moreland Township School District Bus Garage, Red Lion Road.
Good evening, Commissioner. I assume up here or?
Good evening. Yes, Solicitor Rice will be guiding us through the public hearing process this evening. Solicitor Rice.
Okay, let me just give a brief explanation of what this proceeding is. This is a conditional use application which was filed by the Lower Moreland School District on June 24th, 2022. And the request by the school district is to permit a private bus charter use to utilize a portion of the school district ground. Mr. Khan, you're here representing the school district?
I am, sir. Thank you.
And under the township zoning ordinance, because this is a private bus charter, which would operate in addition to the school student busing for the same company, the ordinance requires a conditional use hearing. Conditional use hearing is a hearing much like a zoning hearing board hearing, except the commissioners that are here tonight will hear testimony, sworn testimony, and then make a decision. Tonight is just to make a record, hear the sworn testimony, take any exhibits from the school district council who's here. And I don't think the board's planning to make a decision tonight, but they would come back at the next meeting and vote on a decision because it has to be in writing. You have to have a written decision. So tonight is just to take the testimony and evidence on this particular application. So, Mr. Khan, you have some witnesses we should swear in first.
I will have one witness who is participating remotely. It's Ms. Huffman, who I see is on.
I've asked her to mute, so
Thanks. She is there.
Sir, can I have your full name, please?
Certainly, David F. You know what? David F. Kahn, C-O-N-N.
I just saw that one. Muted and unmuted.
Well, Mr. McGuinn is, as some of you may know, is the business manager for the school district. The school district has its board of school directors meeting at the same moment. It's ongoing. So he is participating, he is watching, but I'm hoping to avoid him having to talk because he's in another room. So for right now, I'm just intending Ms. Huffman. And do you want to swear her in?
Certainly.
Yes.
Ms. Huffman, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony
Yes.
to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
And if we can get the name and spelling and et cetera. What is her name again?
It's Amy Huffman, Huffman. And Ms. Huffman, what's your actual title with First Student?
I am the senior location manager for First Student.
And First Student is capital F, capital S. And before I immediately launch into some questions, I do not anticipate that there's going to be a lot of testimony. This is a very narrow application, as the commissioners are undoubtedly aware. I think it was early 2020. The commissioners elected to amend the zoning code to add this conditional use into table 3.5.2. And the conditional use, as Mr. Rice pointed out, allows a private contractor to do a public use on public educational grounds. Before I do the testimony, I want to make clear what this application is not. We are not proposing to make any changes to the physical site at all. There is no construction associated with this request of any kind. I have had an opportunity to review the two engineers' letters. I'll talk about those at the end. But with that very narrow introduction, I'm going to go ahead and ask Ms. Huffman some questions about the specific use that we're asking permission for tonight. Ms. Huffman, are you familiar with the first student operations at the Lower Moreland Township School District?
Yes, I am.
And can you estimate for the Board of Commissioners roughly how many trips, current bus trips, currently take place out of that facility per year?
Currently we're running sports trips, field trips. So I would say roughly 175 a year. Maybe?
175. Do those include the pickup and drop off for students?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. That's just strictly trips.
Yes. What's the total number of trips just for students in general?
Oh gosh, I do not know that number.
If I were to estimate about 7,000, does that sound right?
Yes. If we include all students pickup and drop off for all routes, for all schools, yes.
And we're here tonight seeking permission to do some charter schools. Can you tell the Board of Commissioners how many trips you anticipate, how many charter trips you anticipate would take place per year?
We are estimating about 5% more. I would like to say we're estimating about 180 trips per year, 150 to 180.
And where did that number come from?
That number comes from currently the outside charters are being done by surrounding locations. So all the surrounding locations, depending on the area of the trip, Lower Moreland could take over the work that's in your area. So that's where I'm getting that information from, the trips that the surrounding locations are currently covering, since Lower Moreland was not able to do it.
Does First Student operate charter trips out of other school facilities, other school operations with which you're familiar?
Oh, yes. All the surrounding locations, most of our locations do operate all outside charter, most of our school districts. Mm-hmm.
And does your experience with that help inform your estimate in terms of the number of trips you think would be added here?
Yes, I do.
I'm assuming, but I'll ask you, when we're talking charter trips, are we talking primarily evening and weekend trips?
Yes, it would not interrupt current school routes or school times in any way. It is nights and weekends, yes.
And in fact, to just be super specific on that, are we willing, I will posit, we are willing to submit it as a condition that there will be no additional trips for student pickup or drop off. That whatever that traffic is right now, it is, we're not going to add any additional trips to either of those, and we're happy to the condition.
Correct, that would be fine, yes.
And do you know, in the current operation, without charters, in the current operation, are we currently transporting students sometimes on evenings and weekends?
We are, for sports trips, field trips for the district. We are currently doing that.
And if the Board of Commissioners grants this conditional use, how will the public make use of these charters?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? How will the public live?
Well, let me just ask the specific question. Will public who use these charters park at the school district facility?
No, there will be no guests on site. What happens, it should be almost unnoticeable. The bus will leave from the depot, pick up their group of guests at another location, take them to their event, drop them back off at the location they were picked up from, and return to the bus garage empty. There'll be no guests on site.
If the Board of Commissioners grants this conditional use, does First Student anticipate purchasing any additional or new vehicles for this site?
No, we would use the current fleet. There'll be no additional vehicles, no coach buses, nothing like that. We would only use the current fleet.
And if the Board of Commissioners grants this use and some problems develop, are you, on behalf of First Student, willing to commit to cooperating with the township to navigate any issues that may arise?
Of course, yes, of course.
Thank you. I have no additional questions in terms of the application, but obviously the commissioners might.
Well, let me just ask a few questions. Ms. Huffman, what type of events are we talking about for these charters? Could you give me and the board and the public some examples where the charters are going?
Sure. Most of our events are wedding events, or shuttles to the airport, shuttling groups to family functions or reunions, but the majority are weddings. So like I said, they're mostly weekends, but sometimes nights. But again, our bus would leave the facility, pick up the group at the assigned pickup spot, and then take them to the event. A lot of times they shuttle back and forth if it's a wedding or a show, a Broadway show, something like that. They would just shuttle back and forth and then return the group to the place of pickup.
And you testified that there'd be 180 trips. Is that correct? Additional trips for the charters.
Yeah, if this is approved, we are estimating 150 to 180 additional trips throughout the year.
Okay.
And again, we have, if there is a condition, if there is a condition put onto that, we have the ability of rejecting or accepting each trip. Our charter center would send us the trip saying, this is what the trip is, it's being picked up from here, taken here, do you accept it? So we do have the ability to accept or reject to meet any conditions that are placed.
And so First Student markets these trips on your website. Not being marketed by the school district, it's being marketed by First Student. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, it's
Okay.
chartered, outside charter trips, yes.
And there's no cars coming to the high school location to get on the bus to go to the event. I think Mr. Khan stated that. Is that correct?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. The only car coming to the location would be the driver who is picking up their bus.
Right, he would have to drive his car to pick up the bus and then go to another location to pick up the group. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. There'll be no guests, no additional people other than the driver on site.
And you said that all the other surrounding schools do the same operation with First Student. Abington School District, do they do charters?
We do not do Abington School District, but I can tell you Council Rock, when First Student had Council Rock, Norristown, Colonial, North Penn, Central Bucks, William Penn, Philadelphia. Yes, all of our First Student surrounding locations do operate charters. It's beneficial to the drivers. The drivers then make more income, which ultimately helps us with the driver shortage. The more money the drivers make, the happier they are. And so it's like a supplement to their part-time position.
How many drivers would be engaged in the charter business on this particular site, on Lower Moreland School District site?
Well, we would post it due to our union contract. We would have to post it. The drivers that would perform the trips would have to have DOT and state physicals, which the majority do. So we would post it as per union guidelines, and the drivers would sign up for it. So we may have, I think there's a very big interest in it. So we may have 20 drivers sign up for it. We may have 30 drivers, or we may have 10 drivers show up for it. It all depends on who would like to get the additional income and operate the charters outside of business hours. I could probably give a better number. Once it's approved, I could always provide the district with the final number.
Does the board have any questions for Ms. Huffman?
The reason that this will benefit the school district is that the drivers will be able to be closer to full time.
There are actually two benefits for the school district. One is that driver retention for sure, which I'm sure some of you are aware has been a problem for school districts throughout the Commonwealth.
Right.
But the second is they are directly, our contract factors in the use of our site for that bus garage. So as we negotiate kind of who pays whom what, this revenue will get factored into that. So the district will ultimately save money on even the school district transportation.
Do you have an estimate on that dollar amount?
I do not yet, partly because we don't know what the charter revenue will look like yet.
Ms. Huffman, is it your contention that you have not been running charters out of Lower Moreland?
Would you mind?
I'm sorry, what?
I don't know how long she's been there, but I'm happy to answer the question.
Yeah.
We have not been in the last few years. I am aware that there's a history that it appeared that without the conditional use, charters have been run. When the township advised us of that, charters were stopped. So we've not done it since then until this amendment.
Okay, well, the parents.
And I believe that was 2015.
That it was against the rules. Okay, so it hasn't been done. One of the things that I suppose we were hoping is that they might consider doing some additional physical improvements in exchange for this approval. Is there any chance?
There isn't. As you know, as a political subdivision, it's one thing to expand the scope of an existing building project, but if you're going to do any construction, you're essentially going from no construction to construction is a much bigger jump than going from construction to slightly bigger or different construction. And the district is not in a position to incur the expense of, hiring an engineer, doing the design, doing the bidding, and then ultimately paying for the construction.
So since this is, it's incumbent on the district to do all projects, First Student is not required to do any of them themselves.
By contract, that's correct. I mean, I can imagine circumstances where if the work were specific, for example, to the bus garage, we would expect First Student to at a minimum contribute or even absorb that cost. I will also note, and this is an ongoing issue, and I certainly don't blame Mr. Woodrow for making me ask on behalf of the commissioners. We're not even actually sure that the retaining wall, which is referenced in that review letter, is on our property at all. And so at some point, we're going to have to resolve that issue, but we're not sure it's actually ours to begin with. The stormwater, that would be a big project, far out of scope compared to the use which is being asked for here tonight.
So while we're talking about possible conditions or issues, there are two review letters, and what I'd like to do is to mark the two review letters that we have. One is from Mr. Woodrow, Township Engineer, dated July 12th, 2022. And I'd like to mark that as a Board Exhibit B1. And then we also have, and he raised the issue of the retaining wall of the stormwater management. The other letter we have is from the township's planner, which is two, and that's dated July 15th. 2022. So we can mark that as B2. And follow up with some other questions, and Mr. Khan, feel free to answer these if you can. The hours and days of operation, we're talking about in the evening, 7 days a week, potentially.
Yes, that is correct. I don't think, and Ms. Huffman, jump in if I'm misspeaking here. I don't think there'd be any objection to a condition to limiting it to the hours that we currently already experience. You know, so for example, if the football team goes on an away game, comes back, we can figure out what that time is and kind of use that as our general window. There are currently already evening trips going to and from that site.
And the estimate is 150 to 180 additional trips related to the private charter only, right?
Correct.
Do we have any sense in terms of future growth of this business?
We spoke a little bit about it, and obviously we have no objection to a condition that caps the number of additional routes. I just loosely, based on the 7,000 trips per year, I'm proposing a cap of 340, which is roughly 5%. And should more than cover any expansion, but we'll still keep, I mean, that's, you know, I think Ms. Hubman will agree, it's very unlikely we ever get to that 340, but that's a number I'm throwing out there as a potential cap.
And the buses on the school district site, the drivers will bring their vehicles there, they will get out, there's an area for them to park on the existing site. They will get in their bus and they will take off.
Yes.
They won't sit and idle for any period of time other than whatever they need to do to warm up and get going, I assume. Is that right?
Correct. Because they're school buses, there are actually state regulations regarding idling time. And whether it's charter or actual school day student transportation, we are bound by those regulations. So there will not be idling.
Any of the other board members have questions?
I do, solicitor. I don't know, Ms. Hoffman, if this is she still on?
She should.
Yes.
This is any of the
Yeah.
township.
Yeah.
This is any of the township's business, but just because you're interested in running these charters on top of transporting our school children, and you know, it's additional trips, and just how do you plan, you know, what's your idea of maintaining the buses to make sure that the buses are in top shape, to make sure they're okay and, you know, transport the kids to where they need to be and they're running smoothly.
So our maintenance schedule, every bus is pulled in every 90 days for a preventative maintenance schedule. So there would be no change in the maintenance. All buses will be maintained, and actually our technicians and at the Lower Moreland facility are fantastic, and the buses are always in very good condition. But we do have a schedule that's required by the company that they are brought in for service, repairs, you know, change the oil, all that every 90 days. We also have a system, a tablet that if there's anything found on the bus, the drivers do have to do a pre-trip before they leave. So no, there won't be any idling, but they do have to perform a pre-trip and walk around the bus to make sure everything's in good shape. So if they would find something, they enter it onto their iPad and it goes directly to our technicians. So they are immediately corrected.
Thank you.
So we have a lot of systems in place to make sure the fleet is always maintained.
I appreciate that. That's valuable information. Is the maintenance done at the bus garage on site?
Yes, it is. Yes,
Okay,
it
thank
is. One additional, just to add to that, one additional point is after a trip is performed. So if if a driver takes a wedding, when the driver comes back, the vehicle is also clean. The interior of the vehicle is also clean
That was my
before
next
going back
question.
out onto. Oh, okay.
That was
Before
my
going
next
back
question.
out onto a school run. Yes, yes, it's cleaned thoroughly, and any trash, debris, anything like that is removed.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Another question, what would be the largest number of charters and some buses that you would send out at one time? Do you have an idea? Like say I called in and say I need 10 buses, would you accommodate that? Or would you say, hey, gee, we only want to accommodate 5 or 6 at one time?
Yeah, so that's a very good question. With Lower Moreland being one of our smaller facilities, I don't foresee us running a 10 bus trip. What happens when we get larger trips like that is our larger facilities take the trip, and we may say, like Plymouth Meeting, for example, is a large location. So Plymouth Meeting, having hundreds of buses, may say, you know what, I'll take 8 of the buses. Lower Moreland, can you do 2 of the buses? So I don't foresee big trips coming out of there, but surrounding locations would tip into that trip rather than having Lower Moreland handle the whole thing. And I certainly do not see over 10 buses at a time, no.
Correct.
That's something that's handled by bigger locations.
How many do you think would go out? 2 to 4? As the largest number.
Majority of the time, yeah, the majority of the time it is only 1 bus per trip. I would say 2, 3, maybe.
Okay.
But the majority of the time, customers usually request 1, maybe 2 buses. It depends on the amount of people, how big they've done it. And each bus fits 48 adults, so it's usually not more than 1 or 2.
Which way would the buses be traveling in and out of the facility? Would they be using Red Line Road or Buck Road?
I suppose it would depend on where they were going. I'm not really sure. I can't really say. Is it I would have to check with the district if it's a preference on which way they go out. Obviously, if the district or the Board of Commissioners would want us to use a certain way, we would make that happen and only use the direction they want. I think I don't think Red Line roads, the other roads probably safer travel.
Red Line Road
But
would be
that would
a little bit easier to get in and out of, but depends on,
okay.
For the bus and the turning, but you'd have to check with our
Yeah.
staff. I'd refer you to our staff.
Yeah, we could certainly work out the details, whatever's preferred.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Mr. Khan, do you have anything else you want to present?
No, I'm sure the commissioners have seen, I said no, and now I'm going to say something. It's not actually a presentation, but the other review letter, I just wanted to point out, mentions the specific requirements for conditional use. And the last paragraph mentions that we make a kind of blanket assertion. Most of the specific criteria that attach to a conditional use are about the site, buffers, side yards, plantings, that sort of thing. We're not making any changes to the site already conforms. So that's why I didn't go through a bullet point of all those. The few that are not about the physical site, such as hours of operation, obviously we've talked about, so.
We're going to have some public comment questions at this point.
I still have one more question. So we're going with 7,000 trips is what we're assuming is out of there.
Yes.
You're saying 5% would be roughly 340 is the max number that you guys are looking to do.
Yes,
You're anticipating 150 to 180 based on the numbers is what I'm hearing right now.
correct.
So let's go 170. What revenue off that 170 approximately would make it back to the district?
I mean, it's going to be a low percentage, but it's going to be something over 0. It's not going to be a big number, but it's going to be something over 0. To be honest, from our perspective, our main interest is driver retention. What we don't want are either sub-drivers or canceled routes. We'll, and hopefully Ms. Huffman isn't writing any of this down, although there's a record. Forego the revenue if we didn't have to deal with the driver shortages, to be frank.
I hear you on that, but before I make my decision on this, I do want a number attached to that, please. One approximation.
Okay, I'm not sure, Mr. Rice. Well, I don't want to put Mr. McGuinn on the spot here.
You can provide that after.
Okay, Thank you. I was going to ask for
you know,
that.
after the hearing tonight.
Okay.
Is there any other board questions? Okay, public comment or questions regarding the application? The board's not going to vote on this tonight. After tonight, they have 45 days to issue a written decision, but is there any public comment or questions on this application? Okay. Mr. Khan, nothing else?
I think that's it. I appreciate the commissioner's time this evening.
Okay, then we'll close the hearing, and as I said, the board will have a written decision to issue at their September meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next item on my agenda is review and consider the final plan. It's Concert Philmont LLC, Philmont Country Club, and it's number 1704. The sequence of tonight's meeting will be, I've asked Solicitor Rice to provide board and the public before the developer addresses the board. Hello and welcome this evening. The attorney for the developer is here. And then we'll go through staff reviews. Lime and I is here to the right of me, our township engineer from Huntingdon Associates. And our land planner, Sam, are you here? Is that you? Wave hello, thank you. Sam Meckley is here from the 2, and then Bob Shelley is all the way in the back. So we will start off with Solicitor Rice this evening. Thank you, Solicitor.
Okay. We thought it would be helpful for anyone watching or I've heard there's been comments out on social media about this project to get the facts and the history so everyone understands where we're at tonight. First thing I just wanted to ask the app, how many acres is the Philmont Country Club total?
240, 216, right? I think it'll be 240 after the 20 acres. So,
Well,
but let's say 260. Yeah.
So you have 260 acres of prime real estate known as the Philmont Country Club. Bear that in mind. And what we're at tonight is a final plan approval of a plan that was given preliminary plan approval back in 2018. So for those of you who are wondering where did this come from, this was approved preliminarily in 2018, both the preliminary plan of land development and also a conditional use decision was also approved. So it's been 4 years. They have 5 years to proceed with their plan to the final plan, which is what they're doing tonight. So over the last 4 years, they've been seeking outside permits from DEP, from PennDOT, et cetera. I think it's important to understand though what happened in 2018 because the Philmont Country Club was zoned at the time for single family dwellings. Your normal single family dwellings, and you probably could have had at least 160 to 200 single family dwellings on that site back in 2018. What came in front of the board at the time was a conditional use application and a request to permit an age-restricted housing development on this site, on a portion of the site. And that was approved in 2018 under the preliminary land development plan at the time. 176 age-qualified residential units, no children, no school-age children, no impact on the school district. And that's what happened then. So the opportunity to build something other than age-restricted really went away on 260 acres back in 2018. Part of the preliminary plan approval was not only approval of that, but also a substantial amount of road funding and open space and a restriction on the rest of the Philmont Country Club that it could never be developed for housing. There is a recorded restriction against the rest of the property that limits it to golf course, park use, recreational use, et cetera. So 260 acres was taken out of circulation, and that might be the largest tract of ground in this township back in 2018. It could have been developed. So that was sort of the give and take that occurred back then. The age restricted housing was approved preliminarily and by conditional use. The remainder of the property was restricted, and there's 22 acres of that remainder of the property, which will be open space. If you come from Philmont Avenue, go up Tomlinson, on the left side of Tomlinson, there's 22 acres there that's permanently restricted to open space. No golf course use. The holes are going away if they haven't already gone. No building over there. The golf course and the clubhouse, they can expand and do additional improvements, but no housing there, no commercial there, no industrial there. It's just the golf course and then this development. So that was all set pretty much in stone in 2018. The other thing that happened in 2018, the property owners made a commitment to do substantial road improvements. They are putting $1 million towards the roundabout at the intersection of Tomlinson, the dreaded 5-point intersection there that was all been through. They're putting $1 million towards those improvements, and they're also donating 3 acres that's going to be needed for that roundabout improvement. There's another $250,000 of fees that are being paid to the township as they build out this project. So that was all discussed publicly. Meetings were advertised, hearings were advertised in 2018. So tonight is, and when you get a preliminary plan approval in Pennsylvania, you can't change that. You can't then deny it, the final, because it's locked in a preliminary plan approval. You know, things can be tweaked if the landowner agrees, but in this state, which is a pretty strong property rights state, once you get a preliminary plan approval because of the money that's expended in going to that stage, you can't then deny the final plan approval unless they haven't met all the conditions of the preliminary plan approval. So we're going to hear about what's left with the conditions that were attached as part of the preliminary plan approval. Tonight is the final plan approval. And as Commissioner KURITZ said, we have a handful of review letters. We have a review letter from her too. And this, I'm reading off the proposed resolution, the final plan approval resolution. We have a review letter from Woodrow and Associates and from her too. We have a review letter from CKS Engineers, which is the township's public sewer, sanitary sewer engineer. And we have some review letters from the township's fire marshal, but there's no significant conditions remaining. And I think the applicant has looked at the resolution and it's a will comply resolution, right? There's no issues in here that
Yes, sir.
that cause you any heartburn anymore.
No, sir.
So with that, I guess I'll turn this back, and that's just the history. That's the way development works in this township, in this state. And the preliminary plan approval was locked in 2018. And anyone that wants to see that resolution, that's actually attached to the final plan approval resolution. There was also a conditional use decision by this board back then for this particular project. These are all documents that are, anyone that wants to look at them could certainly make the request to the township manager and you'll receive them. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Commissioner KURITZ.
Thank you, Solicitor.
Commissioner, before we do continue with board questions, do we need a second to work out IT issues for anybody who's watching us on Zoom?
Audio is still working.
Okay.
Video is out, so we're still recording everything we're talking. So
Okay.
if you feel okay, so continuing, it's just, there's no video right now.
Okay, so
Audio is-
everyone still has
Everyone
sound.
can hear
They
you.
can hear the
Okay,
audio.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Welcome, and we will.
Great, thank you.
You're free to address the board.
Sure. Good evening. I'm Annie Neiman with Hamburg, Rubin, Moreland, Maxwell, and Lupin here on behalf of Concert Philmont LLC. Nobody is going to be able to explain this better than Jonathan Grebo, the developer. So I'm just going to kick it over to him.
Sure. So it's hard to say more than the solicitor did tonight, but we've been working on this project a long time, since 2017. We're excited to be at this stage with the project. Excited to hopefully sometime next year begin construction of the improvements on the project and get some townhouses in the air. We're excited by what it's going to do to the country club. All of our homeowners will become members of the country club, utilize the amenities there, help keep that business thriving in town. And definitely excited for the road improvements and the roundabout to get going. So we're looking forward to contributing to that process as well. As I said, Solicitor Rice did a great job summarizing where we are, what we're donating, what we're giving, what our process is. I think one of the things that I just like to touch upon that we spent some time between the Planning Commission and today is talking about the trail along Tomlinson Road, about what that will look like, what that maintenance will be. It's an 8-foot trail that is going to go from which will eventually connect to the circle, but along our property on Tomlinson, the length of our 22 acres. It's going to be maintained from the right of way through to about, I think we've talked about 4 feet on the other side of the trail. The way we've been describing it is a commercial mower width. So we'll be maintained. That was one of the big topics, is what that maintenance will look like. So we can't be totally specific on the length from Tomlinson, because it will meander a bit, so we don't lose any of the good trees. We'll probably be taking out some of that, the shrub trees that are in there. But that's one of the other benefits we think to that project, to eventually have that 22-acre length of trail. And we're happy to take any questions that you have.
Well, we're not going to ask questions right now. We're going to go through all the reviews.
Sure.
Anything else you want to add?
I think we're good for now.
Thank you. Next we are going on. We will have you.
Thank you.
Okay, you're okay.
Thank you. Our last review letter is dated June 6, 2022. As Mr. Rice so clearly stated, the project was preliminary approved in 2018, but the engineering of the project did not stop at that point. There's changes going on with the engineering of the plan and getting the plan to conform with subdivision land development ordinance. So currently, the state of the plan is that there are some cleanup items that need to be done, mostly in probably 3 categories. There's a list of permits and approvals that have to be complied with. They're probably at various stages of compliance, 7 of them total. There's the issues of the homeowners association and how that's going to be dealt with. There's the requirement for some renderings of the project to see what the housing type would look like. The land developer talked about the trail, the maintenance of the trail. That needs to be more clearly identified on the plan and recorded. And the type of home ownership should be also clearly stated for all parcels, not just for the individual townhouses, but also for like the open space and the other out parcels that are shown on the drawing. And then probably the last thing is there should be a sign package that's put together, reviewed by the zoning officer. That's probably where we're at right now.
Do you like the sign packages on your plans or as a separate? We've seen it both ways in different towns.
Probably as a separate package.
I would agree, Lonnie. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Figured I had a 50% chance.
Of getting that one right. Me too.
That's where we're at with the engineering aspect of the plan.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. Sam, do you want to next from the 2?
I had a question on the sign package, just so we're clear. Do you approve that as a building permit? Do you include that with the land development plan? How would you like to, how should we be prepared to proceed?
relatively early in the process to submit that as a
Okay.
zoning permit. The
Okay,
thing that we want to avoid is that hypothetically, if there's a non-compliant sign that's included on the record plans that are submitted, we don't want to say that there was a variance approved by board of commissioners. We needed to go through the technical zoning process.
fair enough. Thank you.
Okay, Sam.
Yes, thank you. So Ritu Associates has met with the township staff and the applicant, and we don't have any further comments apart from the administrative comments in Exhibit B as referenced in the resolution. I just call out one that the engineer did not, I should say that the engineer, we would second the engineer's comments. One of the things is that identify other amenities associated with walking trails, and they did, benches were added along the walking trail along Tomlinson Road. So that was a comment that we made that was addressed. But other than that, sign package and the rest of the engineer, the comments are, we have no further comments other than what the review letter dated June 14th says.
Thank you very much. Fire Marshal Shaw. You have, we have a letter from you. And I know you've had several and many meetings, and I saw the final plan with the fire truck and the circulation around the whole development. Looks good, it looks good, and all the different hydrants you had marked off and whatnot.
We've had numerous meetings here. The only other issue that we will address will be fire department connection with the FDC
Okay,
for the country club. The country club has made some, want to make some minor improvements. So we're going to sit down with the country club, the builder and staff, and we'll make those adjustments. Otherwise, so as far as we're concerned, we're ready to go.
you're in good shape. Thank you very much. Very much. There's only two other reviews. One was from CKS or sewer engineer, who stated that there was adequate sewer capacity that exists. And then McMahon or traffic engineers, which they were traffic issues related to the proposed development have been stated that they were satisfactorily addressed. We can,
We're ready.
if there's nothing else from the developer, we can open up for board comments to either the developer or any of our review, staff regarding these reviews. Does anyone have any comments?
Questions?
What question?
And
John, could you just talk about in the future whether the developer, the homeowner could claim hardship and be able to sell a property to a non-older resident at the restricted age? Can you in the future change
Sure.
it?
Well, under the federal guideline, there can be up to 20% that are not 55 and over. We don't, you don't usually see it because people move to that community to be in a 55 and over. But there is under the federal guidelines that you could have somebody who is not 55 and over. But you can, but what we've self-restricted is no school age children. So you could, if I was 55, could I sell to you? The answer is yes, but the restrictions in the homeowner's document says, I think we have in this one, or we plan to have in this one, basically your child could come home for break from college. That's how we do it. So it's usually 4 months. Sometimes we've done 3 months, 4 months of that. That's the only, so addressing the kid part. But you couldn't have a school age child live there permanently.
So 18 or older? So 20% of the units could be.
Could, under the federal, it doesn't happen. In the reality of the community, it doesn't happen, but under the federal housing code for an active adult community, you can have up to 20%. And only one person has to be 55. So if you were 60 and married to a 52-year-old, that's okay as well.
Are there restrictions saying that supersede the federal guidelines, so no kids can go to the school district?
Yes, we will have that in the homeowners association documents, which is a comment from from Woodrow,
we have
which
to approve.
Solicitor Rice has to approve.
And that'll address that issue, but
The language discussed in 2018 was nobody under the age of 18 for more than 3 months.
We have 3 months there. Okay. Some places we do 120 days.
And then I think the next part of your question, outside of how the existing unit as proposed can be sold, but you were asking also about can they request that the 55 plus designation be removed entirely? And the answer to that is no.
They'd have to come here.
yeah, you'd have to come back to the board. Plus, you'd have to probably get every resident
Correct.
living in there to sign off on it, right?
Right.
So 176, 55 and over people agreeing on that, and that's not. So.
I can't get 6
They're
people.
buying under that.
Yeah.
They're buying under
Correct.
that restriction.
Correct. Deed
So-
restrictions, homeowners association documents, the township's resolutions that are recorded. It becomes a pretty impossible thing. But one of the reasons there is the 20%, if you were 60 and married to a 52-year-old and you divorce, pass away, then the 52-year-old doesn't have to leave. But we very rarely see anyone under 55 in these. And we've done these all over, 55 and over communities all over the place.
And school-age children will be restricted. You know, in the plans, in the documents, in the development agreement, the HOA declaration, that'll be restricted. So that's just not going to happen.
So you haven't seen the HOA documents yet, but you'll be reviewing them. before
Yes.
they're allowed to be-
Yeah, that'll be part of, once they're ready to fund the project, there'll be development agreements.
Mhm.
You know, like we normally do, the HOA documents we'll review. There'll be some easements, there'll be
Just a few.
whole bunch of paper that has to be reviewed and approved before they can record the plans.
You have 176, am I still?
No, go ahead.
176 townhouses, right?
Yes.
How many parking spots?
I'm going to ask Chris from Bowler
Oh, sorry.
to look at this. No problem.
It
That's
doesn't
why
have
Chris
to
is
be
here.
exact, actually, I'm just.
About 88 overflow spaces and then 2 for each driveway.
2-car garage,
Yeah.
double width and the width,
And there's 88.
and then 88 others. Plus the country club too has a lot of park. We'll have a lot of new parking as well.
New parking. That's right.
Redoing all the parking lots, the tennis courts, all of that upper level of the traffic flow into the country club is being, that traffic pattern is being redone when we do the development.
It's kind of funky, so. I think-
It's definitely funky. It's a good way to put it. Yeah.
But how much traffic are we expecting, you know, from this plan, from this development? I mean, it seems like an awful lot. 55 plus, a lot of people might still be working.
We would expect people to be working. The difference in a 55 and over in all of the statistical books that the traffic engineers is they're just not going at the same time as school age children. So though you have traffic, it is less when they look at the AM and the PM peak. So we agree that the 55-year-olds are going to be, are likely to still be working.
And the traffic implications are considered. So, and again, some of this is just the timing from the preliminary approval dating back to 2018. But McMahon Associates on the commissioner's behalf reviews and comes up with the expectations for what the peak hour trips will be and how those will be dealt with. So through the highway occupancy permit designs, the improvements to Tomlinson Road, as well as the greater state improvement to the Philmont Pine Tomlinson intersection with the roundabout improvement, all of the implications of this development are incorporated into that analysis as to whether or not the existing and improved roadways are able to sustain the traffic. And the answer to that is yes. And then also to your question about the overflow parking, just that's another example of kind of consistency of good ideas in 2018 continuing to come up now. That was an item that was included in the preliminary approval resolution that year. It's condition number 5, and there is a specific plan in relation to overflow parking. I think we've had the conversation often with Tim Woodrow that just outside of what our zoning ordinance requires for parking for the individual homes, that there's no such thing as too much overflow parking. So we tried to work with the developer at the time to come up with spots that would support when there's going to be people hosting for holidays or whatever might generate more cars coming through the development. So we did try to address that and I guess have confirmed compliance with the condition from the preliminary review process.
In the HOA, is there any restriction on the number of cars?
I don't know if we've ever been asked that
Yeah.
before. I don't, but I would say the answer is no.
Okay. They have a 2-car garage. Okay.
I have a question. Do you have any exterior, rendering?
It's being designed as we speak, yeah.
Okay. Do you have a time frame to tell us
For the rendering or for the project?
for the project?
We expect that the ancillary state approvals will take the remainder of the year. Our goal would be to break ground in Q1 of 23. That's our goal. Where we expect DOT to probably be the long lead item. Hopefully it'll be done by the end of the year, but everything's been submitted.
And will we have renderings?
Yes.
Okay. And then from the time you break ground to finish, you think?
Of the homes or of the improvements?
Improvement.
We think it's probably a 4 to 5 year total project from groundbreaking to the end. But I hope the market stays as strong, right?
Sure.
If it was like in January, it might've been 3 years. If it is today, maybe it's 4, but we think it's still a great, interest rates have a lesser effect on this buyer of a 55 and older than it would be if it was market rate. But we still feel great about being in this location. You can't beat.
There's a need.
There's a huge need.
There's a need.
So diversity of housing is one of the great needs that we see.
With regard to the Woodrow and Associates review letter, I know you've filed for the approvals. Is there any? And I know there's, some are pending. Do you have any updates for us?
Hey, Chris,
Yeah, so for the PennDOT Highway Occupancy Permit, McMahon has submitted that for the initial submission. The DEP sewage planning module has been reviewed twice now. We believe we're at the final stages of approval. There's just been some minor administrative back and forth. Our NPDS permit, we have received administrative comments and resubmitted to address those. The Act 2 clearance, I believe the intent to remediate has been submitted and reviewed. General permits and other joint permitting has been submitted and deemed administratively complete. Technical comments are due back in early September. Water from Aqua Pennsylvania has been submitted and we have review comments back that we are currently addressing. And the Township Fire Marshal, you've heard that we have a few minor comments, but generally complete.
Board questions?
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you for everything you've given or are planning on giving. I think, you've made some outstanding concessions. But I also have to say that I have philosophically opposed to this much development in this particular area. So, I just think it's important for you to understand that distinction.
Mr. Rico, can someone also speak to the retention basins that are on site?
Sure, Chris can.
Yeah. So we are proposing 7 retention basins.
I have 2 different ones. I'll share them and you tell me which one to get. There's that one. And there's this.
That one's better.
Yeah, that one's good, yeah.
Oh,
one. Make it a bit bigger.
not that one.
No?
The color one you had before the
Oh,
middle.
yeah.
Yeah, that
Oh,
one.
okay.
Yeah, please. Yeah, that's perfect. Yeah, thank you.
So you can see the basins shaded in the bluish color there. There's 7 different basins. They're designed to mitigate the rate and volume so that there is no increase from what's there today due to this development, and designed to meet the township requirements and the PADEP requirements.
I read that you're gonna have a native perennial mix. Is that gonna be left like in a natural state? So it's gonna be like it's gonna be like a basin and then.
So the
and
basins
then
get
serve
a
like as
seed.
rain garden? also?
Yeah, there's planting soil in there, and then a seed mix goes into there. So they kind of grow a little bit wild. And then also around the existing channel, there is a riparian buffer that's being provided and planted also.
Okay.
Native plants?
Yeah, again, more of a meadow mix. So you kind of left go natural.
That's in the darker green in between the basins. That's the area he's talking about there, the riparian area.
And I warned him. We don't have to worry that the runoff from the golf course, which is above, physically higher, will run into the streets or into these townhouses.
No, there's an existing ridge line sort of at the top of the development to the right, that splits the site from draining into where we're developing and going to the north, to the, it's the Huntingdon Creek that cuts the golf course kind of in half.
Does anyone else from the board have any questions for the applicant or any of our staff members regarding the reviews? Okay. It's time for public comment. Anyone in the room, if you would like to address the board or the applicant or any of our staff members regarding any of the reviews, may you please come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record. We'll be glad to have any of your questions or concerns answered at this time. Sure, come on
My name is Ostap Levitsky. I'm a resident of Pine Grove. I was just wondering if the intersection project will be done before the construction of the actual houses and all.
So they're probably going to be similarly timed. So the intersection improvement project, there was a point where the township, with its traffic engineer and working with private developers, was trying to lead the process and leverage private capital to be able to make incremental improvements. And when that was the version of the project, they were going to likely be more tied to having some improvement in place before housing could be built. We then found out that instead of that incremental method, the state had funded with federal highway dollars the entirety of the improvement process. So that kind of broke off the connection, like the immediate connection of the roundabout improvement from the development. However, the most recent schedule that we've seen, the roundabout design is in its final phases. Through this project, there's 3 acres that is being dedicated at no cost. That greatly simplifies the process. Oftentimes in these state projects, the most complicated and longest duration consideration is acquiring the property that is necessary for the improvements. So with that part taken care of, It's possible that we would see construction begin for the roundabout in the 2024, 2025 timeframe. And having listened to what the expectation is for when site work can begin, that's going to take at its best case scenario, beginning in 2023, you would probably see residential construction begin end of that year, if not into 2024. And there's 176 units to be sold off and built. So I would imagine in that 3 to 4 year construction schedule, you would see both of them kind of going concurrently. And it's possible that the intersection improvement, just based off of market conditions, might be able to beat the residential development.
Thanks. Well,
Okay.
Anyone else in the room at this time? Go on Zoom, okay. EJ?
Yeah, I got it on mute.
Can you please state your name and address for the record?
Still on.
Still on
Oh, here
mute?
she goes. She just unmuted.
Hi, is it me that you're speaking to?
Yes, Laura C.
Okay, so I'm Laura Calfayan, 3231 Maple Road. I'm sort of around the corner from this development. Can we overlap? I'd love to hear the phases of construction. I mean, I understand there's a ton of site work, road improvements before the houses even start being built. Can we hear sort of the phases of construction, the proposed length of time of the phases, and how they overlap with the road development?
Sure. I assume by road, just as a clarify, by road development, you mean the Philmont circle, the traffic circle?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I should have said road improvements, but
Okay,
specifically
well, we
the
have roads
circle,
too,
yes.
so I want to make sure I got the right roads.
I appreciate
So,
that.
So let's just working backwards a little bit because it's easier. We think that our improvements, as Mr. Hoffman was just saying, will take the better part of 2023. Let's assuming we start in the beginning of the year. They'll take the better part, depending on weather, of 9 to 12 months. If you have a weather like we've had the last month, you can go faster. If you have a lot of snow and cold, it goes a little slower.
Mhm.
So that's our length of time. And as Mr. Hoffman says, the traffic circle might be getting going towards, in 24 and 25. So that's how we meet that process. For us, as far as on-site development, so we have two major stages that we need to do first. And one is the remediation of the soil, which was the reference by Chris, our engineer, of the Act 2 process, which is for us to clean up the soil on the site, which was pesticides, but mainly arsenic, which is very common in a golf course of this age. So number one will be cleaning that up. We're keeping all of that dirt on site. It's moving back and forth between what is pretty much the existing driving range and our development site. There'll be a dirt swap operation that the DEP, through the approvals of the DEP, to bring dirt. So all of that dirt, which is key to, frankly, what made the development work for us, is all of that dirt will remain on site. So that's really number one, in conjunction with, there's a lot of rock on the site, and we need to blast that rock to make the development work, both from drainage, sewer, roads. So those are really the two main functions that will go on probably in the first 4 to 6 months. After that, the next 4 to 6 months are really spent on sewer, water, stormwater. Well, I guess stormwater would go in before those, but stormwater, sewer, potable water, and the roadways. We expect that most of this development, if not, I would say 75%, if not more, of the development will be developed all at once. It's just because we need to grade the project, we need to blast for the rock, we need to remediate it. All of that needs to happen first and across almost the entirety of the site. So that will be out of the way. So in our minds, it gets less intense as you move through the year. And then eventually the construction of the homes, you really don't have the big earth moving equipment there anymore. And it's more framing and subcontractors for the remaining number of years.
Great, thank you so much. That's a big help.
You're welcome.
Mr. Rebo, I'll jump in because you brought up
Yep.
blasting.
Yep.
And that's a sensitive subject. to
Yep.
the public. Can you explain how that is handled?
Okay, so it is handled by someone way more talented than me, right? That's number one. I'm not the guy blasting. But there's in Pennsylvania, there's a few major blasting companies. What they do is they blast in small sections at a time. There's mats on top that keep anything, any rock from going in the air. Let's see what we will. There's pre and post blast surveys, as they call it. So anybody within a certain distance of the property, we will survey any structure, any house, but most of that is really our own property. The rock really runs a lot of the rock runs sort of just under the clubhouse. As Chris was saying, that ridge is a ridge of rock between the two drainage points. So that's where a lot of that blasting occurs. Normally you'll have, one blast a day, maybe a few more, as they spend most of the day preparing. I think it's usually in the early afternoon, they'll do a blast, as they've been preparing all day. They don't leave any charges during, that are active and not blast that day. So it's a pretty intricate process. You have a code that we're going to have to follow, pretty strict on time, noise, depth, how much you're crushing, what you're shooting or shooting the rock off, right? So that's really the rock
And
process.
the specific permit is a DEP permit, right?
Yes.
So while we'll have Lonnie will probably likely be on site often for lots of the grading type work that is done, the real inspections and obligations under this permit are handled by the state.
Can you also explain to us about how, you have to deal with the arsenic?
Sure.
And soils?
Yeah. So that I'm far more qualified to answer. So we as a company, my company has developed probably, I think, we're over a dozen golf courses now, most in this state where we're redeveloping, not the state of Pennsylvania, but from New Hampshire to Florida, we've been involved in golf courses. Every one but one has had some sort of environmental contamination, and it's usually the same thing. It's an arsenic and lead. It was used in pesticides up until really into the 60s. And it was used for just what you think, pests and weeds. So you find it in properties like this. As I said, I think this is the 11th property that we've found something. We've our project in Edgemont, another former golf course, has the same thing. There we trucked some of it off. There will be, I misstated before, there will be some that is trucked off. It's a small quantity, because the process of remediating for arsenic is one of the good things and bad things about arsenic is it doesn't move out of the soil. So for the last almost 60 years, it just sits there in the same state that it's in. So it doesn't leach, doesn't go down into the water. So you need to physically move it. And that's the plan for here. So the plan for here is to take the soil that is in the residential, and the state has different standards from residential, commercial, and recreation standards for what the parts per million of that test will be of the contaminant. So here we've developed a process that the DP has given us a few positive nods. Obviously, we have to finish the process with them, but it will be what we call it's basically a dirt swapping operation. So the driving range will be its own parcel of land. In essence, we peel the first layer of the driving range off, and there's clean material under that first layer at the driving range. We'll take that clean material, take the other material that is in the residential area, with the future residential area, and bring that back into the driving range and then cap it. So it'll be capped with the driving range material that's there today. So the good and the bad is that it will not move. It doesn't move. It doesn't leach. It doesn't, because otherwise over the last 60 years, we wouldn't find it in the exact same state that we find it today. So that's one of the long, as I said before to Laura on Zoom, is that's going to be a lot of the beginning stages of the process. And then there's soil sampling that goes on. The DEP, you have to submit all your reports to the DEP. So it's a process we've been through many, many times. We just finished one in Palm Beach County, Florida, doing the same thing. As I said, we did it in Edgemont. So in Palm Beach County, we did it similarly where we kept it on site. But there's some material that is what we would say is too hot to move. So that gets trucked off per DEP code to a specific registered landfill that accepts that type of material.
Thank you for those explanations. Does anyone else have any questions?
One more. Sorry, but
Please.
we've had trouble with construction and our noise ordinances. What steps will we take to make sure that our noise ordinance is properly?
So I don't have to hear from the engineer or Mr. Hoffman, and we're going to follow them all. Yeah, or the police or the fire or whatever representative. I've surely been called by a few representatives before, but look, we do our best. We do our best every day. We hire large, well-capitalized, well-known Pennsylvania-based contractors to do that land work, which is the big, frankly, is the louder noise. You know, that's a lot more of the backing up trucks and the land disturbance. So we know that we have to do our best every day to make sure that we abide by your code, because Chris has my number.
Okay, our other issue has been dust
Mhm.
created by the construction projects. Will you have water trucks?
Absolutely. We're required by code, specifically because we also have, we also are moving soil that has contaminants in it. So I was mentioning a project we're doing in that we just wrapped up in Florida, and that had very similar questions asked of us by the board there. Hours, water trucks, all the important things that we're required to do and make sure we maintain our stormwater management best practices, and as well as construction timing.
Does anyone from the public have any questions? Do we have any hands raised?
I don't see any, no.
Okay, I have one other question, Mr. Reba. The construction vehicles,
Mhm.
which entrance or exit will they be coming
So
in and out of, or once they're,
Well, so I think it's
or once the supplies
yeah.
are there,
So
they'll be
it's a
there?
little bit of a mix, right? So today, as I think you remember, that driveway that's there today is not the future driveway. That driveway is being moved. So we have some staging as well as phasing that needs to be done. So my answer to you is, I think all entrances at some point are going to have construction traffic. For example, coming off Pine Road is where the water line is. So we got to do that work because I can't shut off water to the country club, right? So you'll see activity along Pine Road, maybe a little more, maybe earlier on, because you'll have the water line there, the new water line going up Pine, coming off of Pine straight up into the club. But the dirt moving operation, we really think is going to happen from the Tomlinson side. So I think it'll change depending on where we are in the project, because my responsibility is to make sure that the country club always has access, right? So we have the existing road, then we have the Pine entrance, and then the new Tomlinson entrance. So I wish I had a perfect answer, but I think it's going to be over that first year to 18 months is probably going to be rotating. Then one would be selected as the construction
Just to
traffic.
be respectful to the residents in the area, if I can ask you, if you can just communicate with the township as to what's
Sure.
going on, it would be amazing. I mean, I'm sure you're going to be in contact with our staff anyway.
Right.
And they'll be on site, so.
Yeah, it's just, as I
There's
said, it's
any way
hard
that
to, I
way.
can't, there's no
Sure.
perfect phasing there because there is something coming from
All
from
areas,
all
right.
sides.
Well, Tomlinson, there's not so many residents, but the Pine Road side.
I mean, I personally see
Yeah.
more of the heavier equipment coming from Tomlinson, but I don't want to say there's nothing on Pine because there are utilities and will be a road put in there. But in our mind, the main entrance is the Tomlinson, right? That's where there'll be signage as both as we talked about signage before, but that's where you're gonna be able to come in. We feel that is sort of the focal point of being able to go to make your left into the club and you're right into the neighborhood, straight or right into the neighborhood. But we'll be happy to communicate with Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, it's appreciated.
And forgive me if this has already been decided, just to see, I'm sorry, so you're probably ready to move on, but
We're good.
the area on the other side of Tomlinson that's being
Mhm.
left open, is there any plans for removing, invasive species, any plans for?
So that's probably one of the open topics is we have a resolution. I think we have a meeting of the minds for the maintenance, as I said, from Tomlinson through 4 feet, let's call it, on the other side of the trail or the sidewalk. One of the things we've asked for is just a little bit of guidance on how we think it's best that it goes natural. And once it goes natural, we think that there are less complaints and less, because it will be natural again. We're in that, I kind of describe it as that point where you sort of need a haircut if you're growing your hair long, right? You got to let it get there. But we talked about it with Chris a bit about if there's poison ivy or if there's something that is problematic. The HOA will be there, the club will be there. There are a number of responsible parties that will be there. We talked about maybe twice a year going in there was really the first idea thrown around, which we were good with. But is there a town arborist?
So we have, the Board of Commissioners has an appointed environmental consultant, which is the Pennypack Ecological Restoration Trust. So I think some of the communication that follows is that after that original conversation of coming up with some general ideas, as Jonathan just said, maybe twice a year, and HOA based contractor being able to take a look at things, but also from a kind of more ongoing perspective, more regular oversight, being able to reach out to PERT to see what sort of resources and guidance they may be.
And then our feeling is that twice a year doesn't necessarily, I think there should be maybe that there's a walk of the site that twice a year and say, take care of this or take care of that, because the environmental firm or an arborist might have a different opinion than we do or Chris does. But so that's that's the conversations that we've had about the maintenance of that area.
We have, I would encourage you to contact her before you decide on specific plantings.
Well, there isn't specific, at this point, it's going back natural. Within the development, there is, obviously, we're required to follow regulations for that, but for the 20 acres.
And they might be able to help you in figuring out the best way for it to go back to natural. I mean, you might not be able to just let it go and it goes, because right now, all I can tell you is when I let my property go, it's not going back to natural, it's going to invasive. So you may need to get in a little bit more involved. Just my suggestion.
Thank you.
Does the board have any additional questions? We'll ask one more time for the public. We've been to the public a few times. Okay. Mr. Rice? I'm all in favor for moving forward with this final plan. It's a great project.
So
we have a resolution in our book. Everything that you discussed previously.
And we're in agreement of that resolution.
Yeah. Okay. Chris, what would the resolution number be?
Is 22-32.
22-37. Resolution number 2022-32, resolution of Lower Moreland Township, Montgomery County, Pennsylvania, approving the final land development application of Concert Philmont LLC for an active adult housing development consisting of 176 dwelling units and 22 acres of open space. So it's whereas Concert Golf LLC, the applicant, was granted conditional use approval and preliminary land development approval on September 17th, 2018, which is what Solicitor Rice described. And whereas the Lower Moreland Township Planning Commission and the Montgomery County Planning Commission have now reviewed the final plan and land development. And whereas the Lower Moreland Township Board of Commissioners now intends to grant the applicant final approval in accordance with the PA Municipalities Planning Code. Now therefore be it hereby resolved that the Lower Moreland Township Board of Commissioners hereby approve the final land development plan prepared by Bowler Engineering consisting of 83 sheets, last revised May 4th, 2022. Final plan subject to the final plan conditions of approval. Also described by Solicitor Rice. Number one is the applicant shall comply with the correspondence of CKS Engineering, Inc., dated May 17, 2022, a copy of which is attached here to and incorporated herein as Exhibit A. 2, applicant shall comply with the correspondence of her 2, dated June 14, 2022, a copy of which is attached here to and incorporated herein as Exhibit B. 3, applicant shall comply with the correspondence of Woodrow and Associates, Inc., dated June 6, 2022, a copy of which is attached here to and incorporated herein as Exhibit C, except as follows. In response to the comments contained in paragraph 3 and 4 on page 2, no amenities are required along the walking trail on the west side of Tomlinson Road. Applicant will mow the width of the standard riding mower on both sides of the trail. The land between Tomlinson Road and the mowed area will be maintained by the applicant. 4, the applicant shall comply with the memos from the Township's Fire Marshal dated February 23rd, 2022 and June 14th, 2022, copies of which are attached here to and incorporated herein jointly as Exhibit D. 5, applicant shall comply with all other applicable township, county, state, and federal rules, regulations, ordinances, and statutes. 6, applicant shall execute development and financial security agreements in the form and manner approved by the township solicitor. 5, applicant shall comply with all outstanding conditions of the preliminary approval resolution 2018-43, a copy which is attached here to and incorporated herein as Exhibit E, except as modified by this final plan. 6, applicant shall dedicate all right of way to the township as shown on the final plan in a form and manner to be approved by the township solicitor. 7, applicant shall modify the unilateral declaration of covenants dated March 12th, 2018, recorded at deed book 6105, page 02719, to provide for a future dedication of land to the township, the amount of which to be mutually agreeable to the applicant and the township for a realignment of Tomlinson Road by the township as shown on the concept plan dated July 25th, 2022, attached here to as Exhibit F. 8, the terms of this final plan approval shall be binding on applicant, yet if the subject property is transferred, then in that event, its heirs, successors, or assigns. I'll open this up to the board. I would like to make a motion to approve resolution 2022-32, approving the final plan to Concert Philmont LLC.
Second.
It's been motioned and second to approve the plans as described for resolution number 22-32. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Let the record show that the Commissioner Housing voted nay. The ayes have it, motion carries.
Very much for your
Thank you.
time.
Okay, next item on my agenda is review and consider waiver of land development, Karen James, 2373 Huntingdon Pike. The township has received a request for the board to waive land development procedures for the reuse of a prior insurance office at this location with a salon. If we do decide to give the waiver, this applicant will still be subject to comply with all zoning and grading regulations. Just to give a background, the location is at the corner of Huntingdon Pike and Ann Street. We do have a review letter from Woodrow and Associates. And Lonnie, are you prepared to review that? Do you want my tablet?
No.
Okay.
So the comments in our review letter dated August 2nd, 2022 are three. One, we talked about frontage improvements. We're not asking the applicant to do frontage improvements along Huntingdon Pike, so we would support a waiver for that. And the existing parking spaces on Ann Street back directly into the cartway. This presents a dangerous situation for vehicles going in and out. We need to talk about a better way maybe to have parking at that location. Maybe have some different types of ideas on how to manage that. And lastly, I guess the most important thing is there's a stormwater, we talk about a stormwater management component to that project, and a subsequent plan has been submitted that shows a underground detention basin.
I don't know if you need that, but my
I have a copy of it.
engineer, yeah.
I don't know if the board
I
does.
don't know.
if Chris has seen it. either.
So
If you want-
I guess just in terms of what is in front of the board, if the waiver is generally agreeable, that's something that would really be dealt with on the engineering level with Lonnie and Tim. So as compared to, from my perspective, we're recommending to the board that you get involved in the kind of specific stormwater design. I think the biggest thing is that from that comment in Tim's letter is just to make sure that that solution considers the downhill impact to the neighbors. And to my understanding, what has been designed is a much better version of that than what we originally saw a few months ago.
Yeah.
And then
the first plan didn't really address it probably at all. So this is addressing it. We'll be in touch with your engineer to go over specific improvements that we think might help the downslope neighbor not have a stormwater management issue.
Yeah,
From your development.
we understand he kind of has an issue already, so this would actually help him out. Yeah.
And Lonnie, one other clarification just on that frontage improvements. So obviously, as part of any land development, our subdivision ordinance gives the board the ability to require road widening, curbing, sidewalk, stormwater improvements. And when we get a waiver like this, essentially what we're looking at with the board is this is an existing building. It's a reuse and something that I think ultimately as a township, we really do want to encourage. So we don't as a staff recommend the full scope of those improvements. The only clarification that I would add is that when you take a look at the street view or walk in that area, there are a couple of blocks of concrete that are cracked, as well as the transition from Ann Street onto the sidewalk. So we would recommend to the board that maybe a condition be added that while the overall frontage improvements are agreeable to be waived, at least from staff's perspective, that maybe we work with the applicant to see those smaller improvements made for safety along that pedestrian corridor.
Sure.
Yeah, we are definitely not opposed. We are happy to do that to make it, compliant.
I think perk tests were done on that property. Was someone through like a few months ago taking perk tests?
Yes.
Yeah, you tested the soil. Someone with a tested the soil to check for the infiltration.
Yes, that's
that
what
works
this
already.
is, right? Yeah, the Pickering and Quartz, that's our engineer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark Havers.
Right. So that work's already been done.
Yes.
We can take that information and then go forward with the final design.
Yes.
Great.
So how does this work? I'm sorry, but if we waive the land development, does that mean that they don't have to do any of this? Or how does it
So
work?
the premise would be that, say, what you just saw with Philmont Country Club, that's a full land development. There's huge grading and there's major like regional implications. Technically, the reuse and kind of the scale even on this change for the prior insurance office in its most strict form meets the definition of what a land development is. However, to go through that process as a small business just trying to occupy an existing building would probably render the project moot at this, like there, it would cost too much to get through, like go through all of the engineering and all of the
I
things.
understand that part, but how do we, and you know, I'm sure you have every intention of doing everything perfect. But how do we make sure that they do the,
It's conditions of the approval of the waiver. So
So even a motion to approve the waiver, subject to the parking being addressed.
Okay.
There's a signage
and then,
issue,
Yeah.
stormwater issue, and the sidewalk to the satisfaction of the council.
And the township has existing permitting programs that would address essentially all of the things we would talk about with the board anyway.
okay,
So it still requires review from Tim and Bonnie. It still requires zoning review from Bob. All of those things are built in. It just doesn't have the full scale of engineering that a full land development would have.
yeah. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, since you have parking that's facing on Ann and, you have cars coming from Huntingdon Pike to Ann and residents coming up the hill. It might be nice to have some sort of sign showing, working with our staff, driveway ahead, after driveway ahead, something like that. But
Absolutely.
has to be compliant, so we're just working with our staff.
Yes,
Would you be okay with that?
absolutely.
Great.
Yeah.
And just working with regard to the parking spaces.
Yes,
Be like 8, 9, 10, 11, maybe those being, maybe having your staff park in those. So
Right.
it wouldn't be constant in and out
Right.
all day.
right.
And then the lower lot, having your visitors parking in your lower lot.
You mean, okay, I got you. Yeah, like people who are going to be there pretty much for the majority of the
much.
time.
Exactly, because
Okay.
that's on Ann.
I got you.
instead of
So
those
it'll keep
spots
them there longer so that they're not moving out
moving in and
into
out.
traffic. Got it.
Right.
Mhm.
It's a good idea.
So,
Yeah, because we were thinking of doing opposite, like if we needed them to come in and out, quicker, but it's probably better rather than having them go out into the street. That's
I don't know. the
Much
rest of the board
better.
feels about that, but that was-
Yeah.
that's just a thought that I
Yeah.
had,
like long-term parking there instead of short-term parking. That's maybe what we could,
Yeah,
you know,
the handicap spot's
The
right
handicap.
there because you're right near the sidewalk. and
right,
You can get in close to the building, but the parking, it looks pretty close anyway.
yeah.
And I appreciate you working on the stormwater.
Yeah,
management issues
definitely. That'll help.
And wanting to improve the building. It's really
Absolutely.
nice
Yeah,
porch.
I'm excited.
So does the board have any other questions or comments or any ideas? Okay, are there any questions from the public? Anyone soon? Okay, so I would like to make a motion to accept. We'll make a motion to accept the waiver of land development procedure for 2373 Huntingdon Pike as described with regard to the conditions for parking, working with staff, signage, frontage, sidewalk improvements, and grading and stormwater management plan as described this evening.
Second.
It has been motioned and seconded to accept the waiver of land development procedure for 2373 Huntingdon Pike as described. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it, motion carries.
Okay, next item on my agenda. Thank you,
Thanks.
congratulations.
Thank
Good
you.
luck.
Thank you so
Good
much.
luck.
Thank you.
Is the building officials report. So we had 90 permits were issued for July. We had 515 permits were issued year to date. 608 permits were issued last year to date. 119 inspections by type, 100 residential, 19 commercial. And we have 50 complaints, violations, notices, issues, and days given to comply, and Bob and PD have many more calls. And we thank them for all their time. We also had, let's see. We didn't have. Let's see. While we're going through these comprehensive reports, does anybody have any questions for Bob Shattuck?
2 construction units.
Yeah, 2 construction UNOs, that's about it. And no business UNOs and no residential UNOs. Does our board have any questions for Bob Shattuck?
No.
If not, does public have any questions for Bob Shattuck? If not, I will accept those reports as submitted. Next is my liaison positions, or the planning commission and community events. Planning commission, there is no planning commission for August. And we have 2 community events, and they will be in our township newsletter, which is their open house for the township, along with fire prevention in October, and our Halloween drive-by. And that is it. That concludes my agenda for this evening. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Commissioner, what's the date of the Halloween?
Halloween, the date of Halloween, which has been set, Saturday, October 22nd at 5 p.m. down at Public Works.
Saturday, what, I'm sorry?
October 22nd.
Thank you.
And both events will be in our newsletter, upcoming newsletter, and it'll be on our website and Facebook.
Okay, thank you.
Look for it.
Thank you, Commissioner Kurtz.
Thank you.
Now for Internal Affairs Committee, review and consider minutes of July 12th and July 21st, 2022. Any of the commissioners have any comments or corrections? Then hearing none, I would like to make a motion to approve the minutes of July 12th and July 21st, 2022.
Second.
It's been motioned and second to approve the minutes of July 12th and July 21st, 2022. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Under item G, review and consider August 2022 bill list. Any of the commissioners have any questions about the bills? Any questions from the public, from our published website stuff? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to approve the August 2022 bill list as described.
Second.
It has been motioned and second to approve the August 2022 bill list. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Under item H, review and consider ward redistricting consultant proposal. So every 10 years, the country goes through a process of going through the census, and it has redistricting implications to local government. And first-class townships also have to look at themselves and see if there's any apportionment needs to be addressed. And Solicitor Rice, would you like to explain that process further?
Sure. Well, there's a state act called the Municipal Reapportionment Act, which gives municipalities that have wards, which are boroughs, first-class townships, and some home rule municipalities that have wards, to reapportion the wards based upon some pretty general standards in terms of population and compactness of the ward. So I don't know that Lower Moreland's done this, at least as far back as Chris and I could explore. It's, you know, in order to do that, you really need somebody to look at the mapping, the population centers, whether there's a need to make any changes at all. So I was familiar with Amanda Holt, who has done these types of projects for local government and statewide for a number of years. We reached out to Amanda. She has a proposal to, she is on Zoom. You know, for any questions regarding that, and she has a proposal in front of the board to do this redistricting and to provide basically different parameters, if the board chooses to do that. So what that would mean is, I can let Amanda explain it, but if the board approves a new map, it ultimately goes to the Board of Elections and it goes through a process in Montgomery County. And at the next election, if the ward lines change, then if they're up for that particular ward, assuming they're still living in that ward, would run for that particular office. So, Amanda, did I explain that sufficiently? I see you're on. Do you want to add anything to what I've said?
No, I think you did a good job summarizing the process.
So is it all based on the census?
Yes.
Okay, so the fact that we have all this development coming up would not affect it until the next census.
Correct. Future development, Amanda, I mean, you may want to know about future development, but future development is future development. You based your study on what the current population is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and I mean, we're in 2022, so
Yeah.
we're only 8 years away for the next one. And so I don't know if the board has questions for Amanda. She can explain her background and experience and where she's worked in other municipalities.
One question, how long does the process usually take when you, assuming you're received the vote today?
Sure. It can take as little as a couple weeks or a couple months. It depends on how much back and forth there is and how many changes go on throughout the process.
And you issue a detailed written report?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
It's a written summary you present to the board, is that correct?
At the very end of the process, yeah, well, I'll submit a written summary, yes, to the board, and I can do that in a couple weeks. And then if the board wants to move forward with the next phase, if there are adjustments that are needed, then we can proceed with the next phase.
So just to summarize the scope of what is in front of the board is to review the current boundaries of the 6th ward, based on the 2020 federal census. Create 3 modifications to the existing ward and voting precinct boundaries so that the population remains within an acceptable range. And there's some percentages, I think, that are sort of the standard. Each ward should be relatively close in terms of population. Then would be a legal description of each ward and a map of the proposal. So that, I mean, I guess that would be the initial scope, and then you would provide that to the board as a whole, and there'd be some discussion among the board, and ultimately, the board would have to vote on a change, which then would go to the Board of Elections. I think they ultimately have to approve it also. Is that right?
Yeah, so once the this board decides on the configuration they want, then they submit it through the process so that it gets all the appropriate approvals through the Board of Elections, and that they're aware of it as well.
Have you worked on any of these in Montgomery County?
Not in Montgomery County.
Okay. Because usually the counties have some guidelines or standards. I know in Delaware County, they have a set of standards. In Bucks County, I've seen a set of standards. I'm assuming the Board of Elections, that the board approves this, that would be my next call to see what their criteria are. Because the counties, unfortunately, tend to do their own thing on some of these. But they have to approve it. I think they have to put it in front of a judge at some point, and it has to be approved by the Board of Elections. Any other questions?
Just out of curiosity, is it possible that the results of the initial assessment would determine that no change is necessary based off of the 2020 census?
I will say I've looked at the numbers and it will require a modification. But it is possible. That has happened before where, just there hasn't been that much of a population shift.
And I mean, since this hasn't been done
Right, we're looking at
20
a
or
few
30
decades of history.
20 or 30 years probably. There's been some population increases and shifts, so. Anyway, the proposal in front of the board is for $2,000. And you've got the map proposal. Ultimately, you'll get a final report, with a map of and a legal description of what ultimately the board has to approve it. Amanda's going to present the proposals. This board will then approve it. Public.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Any questions from the public about this process? Then hearing none, then I'd like to make a motion to approve Amanda Holt as our consultant for this process as described. There's been motion and a second to approve Amanda Holt. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Welcome aboard, Ms. Holt.
Thank you.
But we do have a question from Laura Calhoun.
We have one question.
I'm sorry, I couldn't find the raised hand again. I swear my screen has changed since last time. I had one question. Amanda said something about, if I'm remembering what she said correctly, something about if the board decides on the configuration they want. Is she suggesting a configuration, or is she using the board's request and then trying to work under their requested structure?
Well, I'll try to answer that. The way I understand this process is someone like Amanda gets retained. She understands that there's some guidelines that have been recognized by the courts in terms of population. And there's some variation. I don't know whether it's 3%, 5% variation from ward to ward, but there's an acceptable standard there, and then it has to be contiguous or compact. So you can't, have a ward in Moreland Township that, that's shaped like a banana or something. I mean, it's got to be a compact ward, and the population among all 6 wards has to be relatively equal. And I think, Amanda, your proposal is that you'll put together 2 or 3 options for that. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct.
Well, that was part of my question. You mentioned 6 wards. Might there be a recommendation for more wards? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I'm not sure that we've looked at that. If you have an idea, I'd suggest you send that to the township manager. I don't know what that would entail.
I'm happy only working for 6 commissioners.
And I think a lot of the township would appreciate an uneven amount of commissioners rather than an even amount.
I didn't hear that.
She thinks an odd number would be more appropriate.
Better. She doesn't want to cut one of those sentences. She's suggesting.
Any other questions?
No.
Okay, thank you. Under item I, review and consider authorization for auditor request for proposals. Assistant Manager Lee, would you like to explain how our 5 years came and went with our current auditor and what's the next step?
Sure. So according to township code and best accounting practices, the township conducts an audit every year, and that is conducted by a certified public accountant. And the township has been contracted with B. Birdwell for the last more than 5 years. They've been doing a fine job. The township is, though, following proper management practices, organizational practices to go out for an RFP regularly. on a set schedule, not every year, but on a regular schedule, just to make sure that the services that we're receiving is par with what's out there, and also to make sure that our costs are competitive. So, yeah, so this RFP is for an auditor, and it's basically for 5 years. And the 5 years is really what the GFOA recommendation is, that there's a balance between going out for RFP too much and then keeping an auditor too long, and then also not keeping an auditor for enough years for consistency, and making sure that our financials, there isn't too much inconsistency with the review of our financials. So again, the RFP is for 5 years, just to go out to see what's out there, and just to get a better understanding, to make sure that the township is getting the best services.
Thank you for the explanation. Any questions from the commissioners about an RFP? Any questions from the public? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to authorize the issuance of an RFP for township audit services.
Second.
It has been motioned and second to authorize the issuance of a RFP for township audit services. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you. Under item J, administration report, Manager Hoffman.
So the only additional item that I will report on, as many of the items in my report have their own agenda items for this meeting, is to announce that I guess we're suddenly a month away from beginning the 2023 budget process. So on the September agenda, we will have the proposals for setting each of the 3 meetings that we will do through the fall. And that will then establish the timeline for me sending out the budget book to the board and having that process ready to go for consideration in November. So happy fall.
Are you proposing any dates tonight?
Tonight, no.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the manager? Okay, Assistant Manager Lee, anything additional?
2 things. I just want to report that summer rec has completed last Friday. 6 weeks went by rather quickly. It was fun, and I would say it was a big success, thanks to the new summer rec director and all the counselors who really put in a lot of effort. So I do want to recognize them for all their hard work this summer. And then the only other item is the Red Lion culvert and road expansion project that actually went out to bid last Friday. And so bids are expected to come back early September, and that should be before you for the September meeting for consideration. Again, that was just for the culvert and some road improvement at Red Lion and Philmont.
The culvert is done. So this would be leveraging the new wider culvert
Okay.
for the additional turn lane and then the realignment of the
Yes.
intersection.
And that is funded by the multimodal grant for 1.2 million.
Thank you. Assistant Manager, I have a question. Do you have any preliminary figures? How many participants went through the summer rec?
My last guesstimation is 103 with several guests that were that went in and out as well.
Great.
So yeah, we've exceeded the 100 number that we were hoping to target. And we actually ended up having to turn some people away at the end, unfortunately, just because we only had so many counselors, and we try to keep a counselor camper ratio at a good number so that everyone can get equal, that there's enough eyes on the children.
Great, thank you. Any questions for the Assistant Manager? Okay. Under item K, tax collectors report, and we have our elected tax collector on the call with us. Ms. Sal, do you have any feedback for your report?
Just a little bit. Thank you, Commissioner. The face collection at the penalty and discount, which includes both, we're at 95.22%. The actual collections for the face amount is 96.87%. And there's about 3% of the face amount still outstanding. So that amount will be a little bit different by the end of the year because the payments that are being made now are all in the penalty amounts of taxes. The balance currently due at the face amount for the township is $180,261, and the balance due for the trash is $31,850. Any
Thank you.
questions?
And is that common at this time of year for 3% people to opt for the
Yes.
penalty?
The majority of the taxes are paid during the discount period, which is 2%. So if you look at the difference between what we've actually collected for face, which is the total amount that was billed, we're at 96.87%. But the actual amount that we've collected, which includes the discount of 2% and the penalty of 10% factored in, we're at 95% of the taxes. And we still have September, October, November, and December for payments. There'll be one more reminder letter that will go out in conjunction with the reminder letters for the school district, which will go out in early November. And we do get a group of payments that come in at that time. But most people feel that at this particular point in time, they have until December 31st to pay the amount because the amount doesn't change. It's already at the penalty. So, the 10% will add up, but the 3% is basically what's the difference between our 100% collection and what we've actually collected at 96.87%.
And that's consistent with the township's budgeting process, which takes 96% of the total expected value. So we'll be right on. Yep.
So we're a little bit above that, Chris.
Yes.
Any questions, any other questions for the tax collector? Any questions from the public? Okay, hearing none, I'd like to request that the tax collector's report be accepted as submitted. Under item L for my liaison reports, I have nothing to add at this time. The chair now recognizes Commissioner Housen, Chair of the Public Property Committee.
The item I'm here to talk about is the closure of, excuse me, I'm having my words again, Inverness Lane at Sherwood. There is, I don't know, an 8-page report here from the police department and the bottom line is they say that we don't have the sight lines we require to keep Inverness open at Sherwood. They've made some suggestions about things we might be able to do in the future. But right now, what they'd like us to do is to permanently close Inverness at Sherwood, allow no traffic in or out at that spot, and call it a basically a no pass through street. You can, I can give you copies of some of this, but basically, there's just no way to make it a viable open lane. What we can do in the future, however, is change the only real way that we could fix this is to change the direction of the end of Inverness Lane. That will take quite a while and some funding and some property management and donation by other people. So I'm not sure that will happen. Does anybody on the board have any questions?
I had a question. So if we vote to permanently close it, will there be some type of barrier or chain, or how will that work?
Right now, there's barriers, road closed barriers there, and it's chained across.
So that will remain in place?
That will remain in place. They are looking at creating a 3-point turnaround, they call it, on towards the end of Inverness down close to Sherwood, so that if someone wants to visit the lonely people at the very end of Inverness, Sherwood, they can do that and then turn around and go back the other way.
The only clarification that will offer, so that is how we would handle the turnaround, so that deliveries are able to be made or trash collection. However, the temporary signage that is there now, which my assumption is many delivery drivers are moving from time to time. The actual permanent way that we would handle this is Public Works would remove probably a 10-15 foot portion of Inverness as it approaches Turwood, and then put in a large, I guess, grass berm, so that it is abundantly clear that you cannot turn because there is no road anymore.
Thank you.
Any other questions? The public?
Sure.
Yes.
I'm sure that
Can
all
you
the
state
great
your
minds came
name and your
together.
address?
Oh, then you say public?
Yes, yes, I just need you to say your name and your address.
Oh, I'm sorry. Vincent Carpino, I live on, right off of Inverness for the past 32 years. So I've been taking this road for 32 years. And I also warned everybody that visited me, if they're taking Inverness, to be careful on Turwood Road. Nobody has done anything about it in 32 years, and all of a sudden, boom, they're going to close it, which makes no sense whatsoever. Now, Turwood Road is a state highway, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Have you guys asked the state to lower that little hump there so you could see to the left?
Well, we have asked, PennDOT, by the way, is,
That's PennDOT. I said the state.
well,
PennDOT is the state agency that owns the road.
Okay.
PennDOT has requested that we close this road as well. They feel that the sightlines are insufficient. So it's not just our police department, it's actually the state agency has.
So I'm assuming then that Paper Mill is going to be next. Because I've taken Paper Mill because Lincoln Drive was closed and Washington was closed.
Right.
And Paper Mill is also dangerous because I can't see to the right at all. So what are we going to do? Just keep closing roads?
Well, to tell you the truth, I wasn't going to mention Paper Mill and to the police department so that they didn't do that.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
You know, what
I mean,
am I gonna say?
there's two ways to go about it. I mean, you're making circles for delivery. I say the easiest way is to get PennDOT, or I call it the state, to see if they can take off 30, 40 feet, just shave it down a little bit. You can see over the hump and it's not dangerous anymore.
I
right?
agree with you completely. I think we all
Or,
do, but they have not offered to do that.
Correct. So that's reviewed in the PennDOT report. So that's what they call eliminate the vertical curve. And they say because of the low volume of traffic exiting Inverness, as well as the cost for this potential construction project, PennDOT's feasibility is low.
Can we make it a one-way?
okay,
So that was one of the things that we asked. And the challenge is that there's objective site distance criteria that PennDOT has. And none of the 4 possible turn movements meets that objective criteria.
Coming from Turwood onto Inverness.
Because that was honestly the original thought that we had locally, is to at least prevent the left turn out, which is the most dangerous movement.
Right.
And unfortunately, for this entire time, honestly, I agree with you. This entire time, it's been that condition. It was exacerbated by more traffic going that direction while PennDOT rebuilt a bridge on Washington, which resulted in the higher traffic volume to go in that direction. But at the point that they come out to review, I guess trying to form what is the argument in response to not meeting objective criteria for site distance because of the hump in the road and knowing that the state is not going to change it. That's where we find ourselves.
okay. So if the state's not going to change it, one last thing. The other option was to make it a one-way coming off the Turwood and making a do not enter on Deer Path. That would eliminate a ton of traffic, correct? But since you can't make it a one-way, that eliminates that too. So what about a little detour so you go off about 100 feet to the right?
So
That is something that we are considering in the long run, but we have to get approvals from other people and land grants from other organizations. So it's not a quick thing, but we're going to try.
the property be owned by the Pike Trust.
In the meantime, you guys are going to flood.
We have to.
That's a shame.
It really is. It's not something we want to do, but it's something we have to do.
All right.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I live, John Givnish, I live on Deer Path in Inverness. Are those barriers at the bottom with the crime scene tape staying there like that? It's not sure.
No.
So they're currently there like that because legitimately several times a week, they are moved by. I watch them, I watch people.
Yeah.
So I drove by this morning as Steve was putting up the next round of barriers. So that was the temporary solution while the bridge was closed, as well as we were waiting for the review by PennDOT with the hope that this wasn't necessarily going to have to be the solution. So now that we know that this is what PennDOT's kind of requiring us to do in the long run, then that's where removing the pavement, putting in the berm will allow us to get rid of the temporary barricades that are there today. Do you have a time frame? As soon as practicable with the 9 public works staff that we have. I mean, this year, next year, 2 years?
It has to be done before I have to plow snow.
So before
I have
the,
to turn around somewhere.
it'll have to be done before this winter starts because our public works crews need a location to turn around now that the road is closed. Understood.
So what do trash trucks do now? They pull up and then they have to back up the whole way?
This is where our township is really.
And the problem is people walk in there with dogs, kids and everything else. Do you think these trash trucks and these delivery trucks are really gonna take notice after they've done it a couple times? I think it creates a bigger hazard.
What's happening right now, just so you know, is Steve Werner is going there personally to collect trash and recycling.
Because it's a single property that has trash collection
Yeah, yeah.
beyond what is accessible.
Yeah, and they're lovely people who we want. We don't want them to be hurt. We don't want anybody to be hurt, of course. But, you know, there's certain realities we have to face. Yeah.
And just one little piece of data, in the last 5 years, there were 16 crashes there. Out of the 16 crashes, 5 had people injured. 7 additional ones, no one could drive, it's called a reportable crash. So the percentage out of 16 crashes that were serious, that all vehicles had to be towed, okay, was like 90%. So it's a dangerous place and it's just not worth someone's life or ruining someone's life for the inconvenience, you know, that it's gonna cause. There's other safer ways to get out of that development. So that's really the primary focus.
Can we answer your question, Mr. Gibnish?
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Are there questions from online? I do not see it.
So you.
It's on me. I would like to make a motion to permanently close Inverness at Sherwood intersection as described.
Has been motioned and second to authorize the closure of the Inverness Lane at Turwood Road intersections as described. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I have no liaison reports.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Housen. The chair now recognizes Commissioner Canali, Chair of the Public Safety Committee.
Thank you, Dr. Sirkin. The first order of business I have tonight is police pension plan ordinance. There has recently been an approved collective bargaining agreement with Police Benevolent Association. And it included a provision to increase the pension service increment as permitted by Act 600. Pension plan modifications must be adopted by ordinance. There is a letter included from the actuary with the ordinance and a plan amendment for the board's reference attached to our folks here. I would like, is there any discussion on this ordinance? Anything from the public? I'd like to make a motion to authorize advertising the ordinance amending the police pension plan as described.
Second.
Is a motion and second to advertise the police ordinance as described. for the pension. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you.
That brings me to Chief Scarata. We're up.
I have a policy to make you almost last every meeting so that it gets to stay. Is that-
Yes, that's the plan.
Safety and
I tried to put him towards the end so he speaks less.
Ah,
Does it work?
I'm over. 30.
I always plan on speaking fast, but I don't know what happens. All right, for our report from July of this year, of our crimes against persons, we had an assault on the 2300 block of Philmont Ave involving a harassment, public drunkenness, disorderly conduct, and possession of a firearm case. We had an excellent job by Officer Perinace, one of our newest officers, who just got off probation. He arrested 2 males breaking into vehicles. Wound up clearing 5 different cases of theft from autos in our township. That was back on the 1st of July. We still are having some catalytic converter thefts, and we're doing our best to work on them. We did have 1 burglary on Jefferson Lane and 1 burglary at Carson Terrace. And those were both forced entry burglaries. And, you know, we've been fairly lucky over the last year with a lot less crimes like that. So we will be keeping our eye on trying to mitigate them as best we can. 7 drug cases last month, 7 DUIs last month. We did some municipal ordinance violations related to noise ordinance, which some of our residents should be happy about, along the Philmont Avenue corridor. Additionally, for fireworks, with the new ordinance that was passed last year, our officers took action in a case and cited someone, and an open fire pit case. We had a warrant arrest of 2 juveniles from Philadelphia who had active warrants. Again, ongoing frauds. And from our social media and community engagement, we were on the news last month. We have our intern program, and several of our interns have made educational videos that we've been blasting out through our social media. The one related to Kia Hyundai Challenge, in which people are learning how to steal those vehicles, made it to the local news. So we're pretty, they did a really good job. Our interns do a great job. In addition, we did a video about the trailheads and how to keep your belongings safe in the cars. And so they went over pretty well. So we're very happy about that. And Detective Villado was recognized by the Montgomery County DA's office for her phenomenal work solving a countywide church burglary ring. And she received a commendation for that work back in July. 1,680 cases, 76 medical calls. I'll let Bob talk about the fire calls, and 39 vehicle accident reports. I don't have any questions.
One question. People are wondering how to stop or protect their cars from the catalytic converters things. People are going nuts. Is there any ways to do that? And if there are, can you post them on Facebook?
Yeah, we're actually, one of the commissioners sent me a link to something that one locale is attempting. So we're looking at that, seeing if it's something that, you know, would work here in Lower Moreland, but really just kind of the common sense things of, you know, lighting, surveillance, use of ring cameras at your homes, things like that, to make sure that if people are approaching your vehicles, motion sensor lights, kind of all the traditional things. It's just an ongoing problem, and the biggest problem is these companies are able to purchase the metals from these converters, and you know there's businesses making money off it, and that maybe really that's where it should be directed. But and the link that was sent to me involved trying to put identification markers on the catalytic converters so that if they're stolen, then you would have some way to identify what theft they were from. So I'll have to look and see how viable that is, but that's some of the things that we're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Marshal Shell.
Oh, there is one.
Never mind, question for you.
Oh, you got me.
Bruce, just another idea about catalytic converters. A couple of people I know purchased motion detectors that you attach to the catalytic converter. And when you get out of your car, you just push a little tab on your key ring and it activates the detector. So if someone were to try to move the catalytic converter, theoretically, the alarm would go off. And they're cheap on Amazon.
Laura, can you send me an email with the information?
Sure, I'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Let's see.
Good evening. Just a couple minor things. Friday, July 1st, the fire company was dispatched on a second alarm to assist Jenkintown on a fatal fire on Summit Avenue due to the heat and to the conditions of the house. The Jenkintown Fire Marshal also had a heart attack during that night, and we had numerous firefighters down due to heat exhaustion. So guys did a real nice job. Guys and girls did a real nice job on that call. During the Brenathan fireworks, we got a phone call that one of our past fire police members, Bob Wood, had passed away. Bob was a very active member in the department on the fire police, and his family asked us to escort his body to the funeral home. And we did that the night of July 2nd. Small fire on Primrose Lane was some type of device to sterilize items in the basement, and we had a gas leak on Huntingdon Pike. I do want to thank Chief Scarrato and the Police Chiefs Association down this lower end. We were able to program 5 radios, portable radios, with the police band as listen only. So that's given us a little bit of a jump start and starting to work with better communication with the police department. Chief Scarrato was big on work on this for us, and hopefully we're making more strides, baby steps as we go along. So we'll see how things go. And I wanted to thank Steve Warner. We have a light tower from the county emergency management, and it's down here to stay down here. We have a very good relationship with the county. Steve's done a great job with it, and he lent it out to another township for the July event, and it got lost, and it was all through the county. And we tracked it down. We have it back in our possession. I did speak with somebody from emergency management today. Like I said, we have a very good relationship with them, and just want to thank Steve for tracking that down. And we're going to keep that under lock and key for now, a little bit longer. A lot of first UNO inspections are out there, and just some complaints on fireworks that I spoke to some residents about, and just some other odds and ends. Any questions for me? Thank you.
That takes me to my liaison report. First one is with HVAA. I believe the fall soccer schedule registration just finished. Everybody's looking to get started with that. And my other liaison report is with the Huntingdon Valley Library. And I have a summary for you on that. So the library had a very successful learning program. Attendance rivaled pre-COVID numbers, and they read 489,000 minutes in 6 weeks. It's a new record. The library board of trustees is having a magical fall fundraiser on Sunday, September 18th at 3 p.m. in the community room. Tickets are for sale on the website, hvlibrary.org, or in the library. They also want to welcome Ned Hector, hero of the Battle of Brandywine. He will be appearing in full regime uniform to hear about his daring battle. That is going to occur on September 20th at 7 p.m. in the community room. The Friends Book Room is now being recarpeted this week. They look forward to returning to the indoor book sales in September. Carpet under the windows in the library will be replaced this month. The windows have been recaulked. And a big thanks goes out to Steve Warner, as always, for helping set up with the easy ups, changing the mowing schedules, and moving the shelves in the book room to allow for the recarpet.
Again, Pam says thank you, and you guys are great as always. So that's it. Back to you, Dr. Sir.
Thank you, Commissioner Canale. Chair now is Commissioner Pace, Chair of the Public Works Committee.
Thanks, Steve. Item R is Public Works.
Let's give you a couple things late, you guys. So we've been having some issues with the trash company. I think it's more staffing and the weather. So I try to get from them by 3:30 so I can at least give it to EJ so they can post it. You know, if you're getting to places, tell people leave it out. They'll be there the next day. Our street paint's in process right now. So if you see him, that's the same guy that runs our sweeper. So I'm gonna stop sweeping. He'll street paint for a couple weeks. Then we'll go back to street sweeping. We had our sewer lining this year. We decided to do lining. We have some major leaks that goes from County Line Road to the treatment plant, the Chapel Hill treatment plant, and about 160 feet of that line we weren't able to line. So it's in very bad shape. So we're in the process of getting some prices on what it's going to cost to replace that line. So I'll be let you know shortly. The last thing, some good news. I was able to take my muscle with me to meet Aqua. And we talked them into paving curb to curb, Buck Road from end to end. So it was a good project that worked out. I'm sure everyone's happy about that. So. I deserve no credit in this. It was all Steve and the relationship he has forged with Aqua over the years. Saves us, the township, about $100 grand for a lot
That's
of
awesome. Congratulations, Steve.
Nice.
They did a great job. with it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Steve.
I have a question about the trash, and maybe EJ or Chris can chime in. So when we have a holiday and everything's pushed further like a day out, I still see the trucks coming by. Are they just trying to get ahead when they have a truck? I mean, how does that work when they're coming on a day that they're not supposed to?
Right. I get that call all the time and I'm not really sure. They're jumping ahead, but they're the ones that wanted to set this holiday schedule the way it is. They imposed this on us despite the way we had put it in the bid. Before every Monday holiday or whatever the day is, EJ confirms with Republic so that we post the thing that they tell us they're going to do. If they do not follow through on that, I simply do not have an explanation.
Well, I'm not saying it's to our disadvantage. They still came back the day that.
Right, but they end up coming early the day they're supposed to be there, like your neighborhood, if it's Thursday, they come on Thursday when they're gonna come back on Friday.
But they came Friday anyway.
Right.
So I'm just wondering.
We didn't pay them twice.
Right, okay. I didn't know if that was just something that they're doing because they have a truck and getting ahead of it. You know, I didn't know what their strategy was.
That's probably the only logical thing that I could think of. Okay. The thing that we know at this point is to set aside logic.
Okay.
You don't know that film, why would you put your stuff?
No, people didn't even read the change, so they had it out the normal day.
Ah, gotcha,
Right.
gotcha.
Yeah, so they were in good shape.
Yeah.
Item S, nothing to report for my liaison report.
Thank you, Commissioner Pace. Commissioner Auditor is out, and Commissioner Housen will take over for him for the ordinance committee.
The zoning hearing board will be hearing 3 applications on August 18th at 7 p.m. In the here, right? It's here, yeah. The first one is application of Richard Hall of 441 Pheasant Drive. He's seeking a variance to allow a 608 square foot accessory building. Second is application number 2213. Kevin Murphy of 41 Peyton Drive is seeking a variance to allow the construction of a deck. And the third one is application number 22-14. This is CSW Arbor Square, Huntingdon Valley LP of 2507 Philmont Avenue, seeking variances to allow a leasing trailer larger than 500 square feet and to allow 2 entry sites on the Philmont Avenue frontage. So that's the Western project for those who don't know. And I assume these things are not permanent, they're temporary.
Yes.
But they don't put that in the application. Doesn't anywhere in the application, just for informational purposes. So again, that meeting will be Thursday, August 18th at 7 p.m. Now, I the last meeting, the last hearing board, it was July 21st. And there was only one item up, and it was for Roxana and Catalin D. Cosma of 3534 Hale Road. They were granted a density and dimensional requirement reduction to put in a covered patio. They also had a variance to allow the construction of an uncovered patio and another uncovered patio in the front yard. So the first two were in the backyard, the third was in the front yard.
And Commissioner, I want to make sure I answered the right question. The leasing trailer is temporary. The signage is the permanent signage.
Oh,
So I
that
wasn't
is
sure
a
what I
permanent signage?
Yeah, so those would be, every development is permitted one kind of entry sign along their frontage. They're proposing two that are angled in a way that you would see each sign separately as you approached it, opposite directions.
Okay. All right, well, that'll be up at the zoning hearing board later this month. So if you have any issues or problems, please feel free to go to them and talk to them about it. His liaison positions are the zoning hearing board, which we've already covered, and Pennypack Ecological Restoration Trust. Does anything happen for Chris?
No.
Okay,
Okay,
I am done.
thank you for filling in, Commissioner Hauser. That completes our agenda items. Now we're going to open up to public participation, public comment on non-agenda items. Any, sir, come up to the front.
Chuck Day 2472 Dale Road. I have a question for the engineer. I don't want to catch you off guard. The code for Western is required a water truck on site.
The code requires them to keep the dust down to the best of their ability.
Right. And then that day that they had the dust storm over there, a water truck appeared.
Yeah.
But Western refused to fill it. They refused to pay for the water.
There's an ongoing situation between Western and Birch Ridge.
Right.
That's correct.
So are you aware of any OSHA violations on that site?
I'm not.
And that there was a fine implemented to one of your subs on that site?
I don't have any subs on the site.
Well, Western subs.
No, I'm not aware of
Okay.
it.
There was one. It was, I think it was the roofer who violated most of our ordinance with the noise out of hours. OSHA did fine him, total of $4,500 plus some change, and there's 3 other OSHA pending violations on this site.
Okay.
And I don't know if the township was aware that they sent a sweeper down Dale Road and it dry swept, no water, so it was a dust bowl. Again, on Dale Road. I don't know.
Who sent the sweeper?
I don't know who it was from. Wasn't a township sweeper. It came from the site. We followed it back to the site. And
Wow.
it just created
We can't get him to get a sweeper on the site.
it just created a massive mess on Dale Road. I mean, there was no water coming out of it. It left, I don't know if you see the white marks.
Yeah.
It stained the actual street on Dale Road.
It either had to be Blair or Birch Ridge.
I don't know who it was, but
You had those two.
there was no marking on the sweeper, so, but there was no water in it either. So when it did sweep,
Yeah.
you can imagine what it did. So
Sweeper-
that's,
the
we've
sweeper
been
goes down-
fighting,
When
we've been
sweeper goes
fighting
down
the
the road,
dust.
the water comes out first.
Yes.
And then it sweeps.
Then it sweeps up, right? But, I mean,
I'll-
I got it was a 12-page document that I received from OSHA. I think it was, I believe it was the roofing contract, 8001 Castor Avenue was his location. And he didn't contest it, so he's going to pay the fine. And there's 3 other outstanding OSHA violations on that site. That's coming, so.
All right, so I'll check with the contractors, and if there's additional cleanup that needs to be made on your street, well, I'll have them clean up.
No, don't send a sweeper.
I'll send a water truck to water.
Yeah, they don't have that either. They don't pay for the water.
And on that same note, if it was them, could you ask them why they did it? in that
Yeah,
order?
yeah, we should find out why they went off site. Yeah,
And why they
authorization.
did it in that fashion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have another question?
Yes, there is Leslie Bruno on Zoom.
Go ahead. Ms.
Hi,
Brown.
everyone.
Just state your address. Thank you.
Leslie Bruno, Grasshopper Road. I have a question about, there has been continued problems with people parking their cars on their front lawn. Now 1503 has about 5 vehicles, including a truck, parked on their lawn, on their property. And I understand in the E code that that's not appropriate, that's not. And also 1570 and 1590 on a regular basis park their cars on their lawn, not in their, and they both have large driveways, but they continue to park on their front lawn. And 1503, or no, I'm sorry, 1355, for the past 3 years has had trucks and cars parked on their property that are not in use, and also a sign that has been there for 3 years. And I know that when I had an addition put on my house 4 years ago, the township took my sign down, the builder's sign down, because it was not allowed to be on the front lawn, and they actually took it down. So I don't understand those 5 issues.
Ms. Bruno, Grasshopper, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Our code enforcement officers here in the room, we have records of this now, so thank you for bringing it to our
And I've
attention.
also emailed about it too, so.
Yeah, thank you for bringing it before the board and the board's attention. Thank you.
Okay, I appreciate it. It is, it's a nice road to live on, and, it's just, I don't live out in the, it's like living on it, even at the farm where we don't even park our trucks on the grass, we park them in the driveway. So I appreciate it.
Thank you for your comments. Any other public comment? Any other last minute comments from the Board of Commissioners? Hearing none, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting. There's a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned.